The 50 Podcast.
50 Podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the 50 Podcast. It's your host Kylie, and today I'm really excited. We recently connected online, and I saw her post about her story, so I reached out to her and I knew I had to have her on the podcast. So this is Kylie. Kylie is a former law enforcement officer who speaks on her experiences of love and loss, health battles, and how to know when it's time to hang up the cuffs. And for my listeners, I just want to say that I think it's important to have people that absolutely want to be a police officer till the day they die. And some people do it for 10 years, 15 years, 5 minutes, whatever it may be. At the end of the day, once we're a police officer, it's never gone. Right. And there are people that want to leave, and we'll talk about it, and are too scared to. And I think it's important to highlight all sides of being a first responder. So I'm really thankful that you're here. But for our listeners who don't know who you are yet, give them a quick bio about yourself, just a little brief about you, and then we'll get into it after that.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Kylie, and I grew up in a small town in Connecticut, kind of like southeastern, northeastern kind of Connecticut. I never wanted to be a cop, but I went to college and I thought I wanted to be a nurse. My mom's a very successful nurse, and my dad's a very successful construction business owner. So I kind of figured that maybe I wanted to go the nursing route. And once I decided that that was probably what I was going to do, I very quickly was like, no, this is not for me. My mom said I would probably have the worst bedside manner ever. So I decided maybe I need to do something else. And I always loved law. So I originally thought, well, I want to be, maybe I'll do prosecution. Maybe I'll be a lawyer. And I remember taking a policing course and kind of falling in love with it. And it kind of shocked me because I don't know what I pictured policing like, but it was definitely not how it actually was. I loved watching live PD, and I was like, wow, this is so awesome. But for some reason, it didn't connect that I would enjoy something like that. So, I'm 5'2", 120 pounds. It was never on my radar to be like a street cop, right? So eventually, I took the policing course, fell in love with it, had an internship, fell in love with it even more. And then I decided to declare my major with administration of justice, and went to school in Newport, Rhode Island at Salve Regina University, which was a great, great university. I met my advisor, who I still stay in touch with to this day, who's kind of steered me into the law enforcement career. So that was where my career kind of started. I was a dispatcher for about 2 years before I took the cop role on. And then once I met my boyfriend currently, we moved to Florida in Volusia County, and I picked it up kind of when we moved down here, and recently decided that, it was no longer for me.
That's awesome that you were a dispatcher first. I feel like so many people were dispatchers before they went into law enforcement. So that's really cool. That's like I wish that I did that first. I think I feel like it should almost be a requirement. Like you have to do a year or something so you can understand their job.
Yeah, I actually think it's a harder job than being a cop. I think
It's so hard.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I can't even imagine. And I would lose my voice so fast, girl. But so we're going to go over your foundation in law enforcement first, then we're going to get into the nitty gritty of all the other things.
Okay.
But I like to ask all my guests the same question, just because I get curious on how you ended up, where you ended up. And it sounds like you explained it a little bit, but tell us about your family life and growing up.
Yeah. So my parents were together until I was about 6. They were never married, but they split when I was around 6. So I lived primarily with my mom for a while, and I think that's where I kind of got the really great independence from. My mom kind of raised me at 7. Because I was with her for most of the time. Not that my dad wasn't in the picture, he was very involved, but my mom is a very, very strong woman. So I think, I always say I get the 50% of best of my parents. So like 50% of the best of my mom, 50% of the best of my dad. She kind of gave me half of my heart, and then my dad gave me the other half, where the horrible bedside manner of being a nurse would have came from. Uh, so my dad, I kind of grew up being at his construction shop, and so I was around guys all the time. So going into law enforcement as a female, and that's predominantly male, it wasn't really a scare to me. I wasn't nervous about it, and I got along with all of the guys really well, just like I was kind of, another guy. It's funny because the guys at my last apartment that I was with, we always joked that I was Kyle at work and I was Kylie at home. Uh,
I
so
love it.
yeah, so my nickname was Kyle, but yeah, so that was kind of growing up. I saw how hard my parents both worked, so it instilled like a really, really good work ethic for me. So I knew that whatever I did, I wanted to work hard in it, and I wanted to. I didn't care if I wasn't sleeping too much. I just wanted to, the cliche, help people, but I also wanted to know that I was working towards, bettering people, and maybe I could make a change. And I think policing kind of gave me that opportunity to maybe put a better face to policing, especially, I joined in 2020. So it was kind of the height of a lot of things with law enforcement. So I wanted to kind of show that not all police are bad and females can do it. And so I think we have a strong, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but I was listening to one of your podcasts the other day, and one of the girls was talking about how we have a special set of skills as a
Yes.
officer. Yeah, and I
Probably Tara.
yes, yeah,
Yes. Oh my God. She was like preaching to me. I'm like, girl, yes. How we all have like, we're different tools in the toolbox.
right. So
We each bring a different tool.
yeah, and I knew that I was really good at talking to people, and that was kind of like my superpower was, okay, I can get people to talk. And once I learned that, like, I didn't want to be a prosecutor, I remember my advisor, I took one of his courses, and he was like, who wants to be a lawyer? And a lot of people raised their hand. I was one of them, and he said, stop. We have too many. We don't need any more lawyers. And so he kind of steered me into this career, like I said. But that's kind of how growing up was. I didn't have it bad at all, and my parents really really shaped me. So
I love it. I love that you had like the best of both worlds. You got to learn from like a strong woman and you got to learn from a strong dad. And it's interesting to hear you say like I was around guys all the time. So like going into law enforcement was an easy transition
right.
for you. And it can be for some and it can be totally different for others, but
Yeah,
I like working with guys. I think it's fun.
yeah,
I can joke and hang out with the best of them, but it's cool that you got that experience where you got to see how a woman takes care of her home and has to provide and has to be strong. And then you also got to see a man take care of his family too. So I can see how that would round you as a really good officer. Um, so you became a police officer in 2020 during the riots and during COVID and all of that.
yeah.
Uh, What's been your favorite experience or least favorite experience and role and while you were a police officer and why?
Oh, I think dealing with victims was primarily probably my favorite. I think you're walking into a house, you obviously have to have your command presence and everything. But again, being female, that's kind of where our superpower kind of comes in. A lot of people are very hot and heavy, especially the guys. They want you to talk to them right away. And it's like, okay, let's learn how to kind of relate to these people. Um, I don't think that obviously we know certain people that we arrest. You're just not going to get through to them. However, I don't think that I have had anybody that was reasonable ever not fake me at the end of our encounter, whether it was somebody that I arrested, gave a ticket, or was a victim. Um, I think that kind of speaks volumes about the kind of career that I had, because all of these people that we deal with are still human at the end of the day. You don't have to do policing in a certain way where you're like big macho. You can still treat people as if they're human. So
Yeah.
I think that was probably my favorite part. The least favorite part is when, you're kind of you're kind of tied, like you can't really do much for somebody that you want to help. That was probably my least favorite, and night shift. I absolutely hate night shift. I'm not a person that is like, yeah, this is, this is awesome. I love, finding the dope at night. I love doing this stuff. I love being up when nobody else is. I'm like, no, I feel so sorry for myself when I'm driving and like everybody else is going to sleep, so I think that was probably also my least favorite. Um I think the other thing that I didn't really like, and I'm sorry I'm not doing just one, but,
Oh,
I
you're good.
think this is important to talk about. Unfortunately, I don't think that the camaraderie is the same, and it kind of sucks that we have very good opportunities to, bond with the people that we work with, especially when we're going into buildings, if we have an active shooter, if we have an active domestic, we have each other's backs like no other career basically does. But yet we don't have good relationships throughout the departments, and that kind of sucks. So I don't, that was something that I didn't like. I think the culture of police is, I'm not a fan of, but I think that it can get better. I'm hoping it does, but that was one of the things that was kind of like not great for me.
Yeah, I think most people can relate to everything you just said. But yeah, the culture is very interesting. And we'll get to that when we talk a little bit more.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's funny because the person that might be talking shit about you or whatever is also the person that you might save their life the next shift and with no hesitation. So it is bizarre.
Yeah.
It's a little strange. We should all be kinder to one another, especially when the whole world has opinions on you and your job and what you do and everything like that.
Right.
The least we can do is support each other. But a lot of us don't. We are our own worst enemies, and you're preaching to the choir, girl. But when you chose this career, did you have any pushback from friends or family?
Um, I lost a couple friends because certain friends just didn't agree with being a cop. They didn't like cops, whatever. My family, I thought my mom was going to have to go on anti-anxiety meds. Uh, she was very, very worried, but she kind of learned how to deal with that on her own. And then my dad, it's funny because my dad kind of did like a 180 on me. At the beginning, I think he was nervous, but he didn't tell me that he was nervous because he's not a very emotional guy. He was kind of like, well, you're 5 feet, barely anything weight wise. Like, what are you gonna do if you gotta pull me out of the car? And I'm like, no, the fuck you're not. And I'm like, well, Dad, I go through training and all of this, I'm gonna learn tactics and blah blah blah. And I started the police academy, got through the police academy, and after that it was like the biggest thing that he, like wanted to tell everybody. Oh my
Yeah,
God.
so proud.
Yeah, exactly. So, he was a really big supporter, and he was the last person that I told, that I decided to resign because I wanted to wait it out as long as I could, because but he was supportive as, parents are, so, and my reasons, he understood, so.
Yeah. No, definitely. It's my mom, I feel the same. They get better with time, but it's still, I mean, I don't still think that they sleep with like half an eye open every night. There's no way that they they go through what every other parent goes through. I think it's a little bit more pressure. And
Absolutely.
that's props to them.
Yeah.
Um, so for females beginning this career, what advice would you give them if they're thinking about becoming a police officer?
Yeah, I think go into it with an open mind. You're going to definitely have to probably prove yourself a little bit harder than the guys. Not that there's anything wrong with that, because, females going to the field, you shouldn't have a problem doing that. But go into it with an open mind. And I also think never stop training. This is a job that you constantly have to learn new things. You're never going to stop learning this job, and you're going to be 4, 5, 6 years on and still go to a call that you've never dealt with before. So I think having an open mind and then just constantly training, constantly learning, I think is super big for females. I think self-defense classes are super important, jujitsu, things like that. My biggest fear was if I'm on my back and somebody's on top of me, I'm not a big person. How do I get out of that? Learning those things that maybe some guys might not really have to worry about is super important.
Yeah, no, for sure. And at the end, I'm going to ask you the opposite question. What advice would you have for women who want to lead? So
Mhm.
stay tuned. So we're going to get into a little bit more serious talk. Little bit trigger warning for our listeners. So while you were a police officer, you met someone named Adam, who was also a police officer. Um, and then you guys, if I'm not mistaken, became a couple. You started dating.
Yes, we did. Yep.
Okay. Can you tell us about how you met Adam and how it was dating another police officer? And then we'll go to the next question.
Yeah. So I met Adam probably one of the first few days that I was hired on in my first department in Connecticut. And yeah, so my department hired me early because they said that they didn't want anybody else to pick me up, which I told them, you guys are the only ones that I'm applying to, don't worry about it. But they picked me up early before the academy. And so basically what I was doing was ride-alongs at starting cop pay, which I was very okay with.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was a good introduction to the actual job, but he was one of the guys that I had rode with. And so we got to know each other a lot, and it was funny because I remember him like grabbing his phone. One of the very first memories is I remember him grabbing his phone and plugging it in, and he said, "All right, most important part of the night." I'm like, "Oh, listen, deciding what music to listen to." He goes, "Yeah." I said, "Oh, what do you listen to?" And he's like, "Oh, you're gonna hate it." And I was like, "What?" And he was like, "K-pop." And I was like,
What?
"Yes, yes, Korean pop." He was like all over BTS. He loved BTS. He was a very, very quirky, very funny guy. But yeah, so I met him and it just kind of clicked. We got along really well. He was there for 14 years, so he knew the job very well, and it was somebody that I learned from, constantly. And so I almost didn't want to be on scene with him because I didn't want to fuck up in front of him. I always wanted to be perfect. I wanted to impress him. And he was never the type of person to be like, you shouldn't have done this. He was always very supportive. And so that's how we kind of met. And then we started seeing each other. And yeah, it just took off from there. We worked the same shift. He wasn't a superior or anything, so there was no like issues working the same shift or anything. We kind of kept it on the DL for a while just because of some things he had going on, and I didn't really want nobody needed to know at the
Yeah.
beginning. So, but eventually, towards the 2-year mark, it was kind of like, yeah, everybody knows. It's not a secret anymore. So.
Yeah. And were you guys both on night shift?
We were on eves, so it was like
Oh,
kind
like
of
afternoon?
yeah.
Okay, okay. I worked that too. Yeah, that's like my favorite.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the best. So, um, okay, so you guys date for 2 years,
Yep.
and then if you whatever you're comfortable with
Yeah.
and whatever what happens to Adam?
January 2nd of 2023. Adam had struggled with mental health, but he was very open about it. He was kind of like somebody that wore his heart on his sleeve. He was the type of cop that came in a roll call and you knew exactly how he was feeling.
Okay.
He was also the cop that is like, he's so funny. He's always making everybody laugh. Constant jokester. But he wore his heart on his sleeve, and you could tell, okay, he's having a rough day today. And I remember Friday night, the first was on a Monday, or the first was on Sunday. So the Friday before, he had slept over at my place, and Saturday morning, he was leaving. He said, I'm gonna go to Costco. Do you need anything? I said, no, I'm good. Um, he kissed me goodbye, and then after the first kiss, he was like, give me another one. That wasn't really great. So I'm like, okay, so kiss him again. He leaves. And then Saturday night, he had his own apartment. I had my own apartment. We weren't living together yet, but um, he goes back to his apartment, and that's when I kind of noticed a shift in his mood that night. Um, so I didn't know exactly what was going on. Hey, do you want to talk about it? Like, what's bothering you? Usually he was a person that was like, no, I'm going to get over it. It's just he'll internalize it, and then he'll be back to normal Adam in a couple days. So, okay. So Saturday night is obviously New Year's Eve. So I text him.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because I'm working. So I text him and I say, hey, can't wait to see what 2023 has in store for us. Really excited. We had, the normal big plans for that year and stuff. So he just hearted it back. And so I thought that was weird. But okay, give him some space. Maybe he's dealing with something. I don't know. So then Sunday morning, still the same thing. He obviously wasn't out of his mood. Still, again, have no idea why, but not going to force anybody to talk if they don't want to. So Sunday night, I work, and Monday we were supposed to work together. So Monday night I work, I get out at midnight, I'm going home, and I tell him, hey, I'm not feeling too well. I'm going to take some NyQuil and go to sleep. Good night, I love you. So then, good night, I love you. So I go to sleep. I wake up Monday morning. He had already texted me good morning. So I say good morning, and then I realized he had called out. So I was like, it's weird. But not out of the ordinary. Again, like sometimes he would call out, whether it was, dealing with family stuff, or he just needed a day, as police officers in any profession, but especially in the you need to
But usually he would like tell you, right? Like, hey, I'm calling off tonight.
Yeah, weird for him, especially like so my Friday was his Monday, my Monday was his Friday. So
Yeah.
We worked together, and I was like, if we're working together, why wouldn't you just take a day off where we could both be off?
Right.
It was just weird. So I said, oh, you called out? And he said, yup. And I was like, okay, still clearly in a mood.
Yeah.
Well, I said, why? I asked him why he called out, and he said, I don't feel well and I got shit to do. Okay. So I said, okay, I'm sorry you don't feel well. And his response to that text was, I love you, right? And that was very weird to me. I said, why are you asking? He said, because I don't want you to think me calling out has anything to do with you. Again, weird. Really weird. So I end up calling him because I'm like, I don't even know what's going on at this point. So I said, I called him, I said, hey, and it sounded like he was in a rush, like things were moving. He was trying to like go somewhere. So I'm like, what's going on? And he's like, I'm gonna go out running errands. And I'm like, okay, where? He was like, stores. He like wouldn't tell me what stores he was going to. So I'm like, okay. He's like, I'll talk to you later. And like hung up. He could not like get me off the phone quick enough. So I'm like, okay. So flash forward like an hour or so, I get a call from one of my lieutenants.
Oh, wow.
And he says, hey, when's the last time you talked to Adam and how was he? And I'm like, why? And he goes, well, there's a couple things that are concerning. The chief got an email. I didn't know what the email consisted of. But she got an email that was kind of concerning. We're just trying to figure out where he is. Where do you think he would go? Because nobody knew at the department where he would go, but I had an idea. So I said, maybe he would go see his mom at the cemetery because his mom his mom had died when he was 10. So, and he didn't know that she was buried locally up until like the year before. So we were going there quite often to kind of visit her because that was really new for him to be able to kind of visit her and see her. So that was kind of like a special place for us too because he didn't bring anybody else there ever. It was just me and him. And so I said, maybe he would go there. But to be honest, like I'm not sure, this is how you can find where she is in the cemetery. I get off the phone with him, and that's kind of when I was like really starting to kind of get nervous. But then again, at the same time, you're like, you always keep telling yourself, like, there's no way, there's no
Yeah.
way himself. So I remember calling my best friend in the department and she said, she kind of calmed me down. She's like, look, we all go through, things. Why don't you just go to his apartment? And I was like, well, I don't want to be, too pushy. And I don't even know if he's going to be there because he said he was running errands. So she kind of calmed me down a little bit. And then I started getting ready for work because I was supposed to be going to work.
Yeah. Oh my
And
gosh.
I get another call from a different lieutenant, and so I answer, and she says, "Hey, we're here, like, at my place. Can we come up?"
Oh God.
I'm like, "Yeah, fine, whatever." Still completely in denial, right? Like, now
Right.
at this point, I'm like, I'm rushing to, look, if he did something, he would have left me a note. So I'm going through all of his clothes in my closet. I'm going through his bag. I'm going through,
Oh
you know,
my God.
thing, and I don't find anything. So I'm like, okay, sigh of relief. And I don't know if your department is the same, but when we're doing death notifications, we usually wear our hats.
Yeah.
So I open the door and they're not wearing their hats. And I'm like, okay, another sigh of relief. And so they come inside and they're very quiet. And I'm thinking maybe they just need to know more. Maybe they can't find the cemetery, anything but what they were going to tell me. And I remember standing on my kitchen island and they're across from me. And she kind of slides her hand towards me and she goes, there's no easy way to say this, but state police found him at the cemetery and he committed suicide. He's gone. And I
The cemetery.
Yeah, yep, at his mom's grave. So I remember, looking at my other lieutenant and I said, "He's gone," and he shook his head, and I couldn't say anything other than, "No, he's not," and, like, I kept screaming, and then I got louder and louder, "No, he's not. No, he's not," and they said, "Let's sit down. Let's sit down." So they sat me down, and they did very well. I can't thank them enough for how they handled it. As cops, we're taught how to do death notifications, but nobody's ever taught how to receive, death notifications. So
Yeah. Oh my
that was
God.
something I had to go through that I never in my, life thought I would have to go through a death notification, be on the receiving end. And so, they said, do you want us to call your mom? We're not going to leave until somebody else gets here. And so I said, no, I want to call my mom. And I can't even remember how many people showed up at my place that night. A lot that I can barely even remember. The support was crazy, but so what had happened was when I went to bed the night before and I had texted him good night, I wasn't feeling too well. He had gone to the department and did kind of like a drive through just to make sure that everybody was pretty much out on the road. And then he grabbed his rifle and he left and he went home. And then in the morning he left and he went to the cemetery and that's where he did it.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I have the chills all over my body.
The email that they said was suicide notes. So he had sent um all of the notes to my chief and to himself. So right before he did it. So I did end up getting a note It just
Okay.
wasn't at my place, but
Yeah.
so because he was very smart. He was very, very smart. He knew that
Yeah.
we like his phone. He knew that we were going to put a bolo out for him.
Yeah.
About the spoon as soon as he sent the emails and uh did it right after. So
Wow.
yeah.
And you said that like before you had known he kind of struggled with some mental health stuff
Yeah.
before. Um, and you said he worked for 14 years as a police officer. Do you think that some of the mental health struggles he had was because of his job as a police officer or a combination of
I think
things?
combination. I think him growing up, so his mom was actually murdered when he was 10. So, his dad was a druggie. He didn't really have a relationship with him at all. And then he was adopted by his aunt and uncle. He didn't really have too much of a great relationship with them either. So growing up, I think it was pretty tough, but he was always very open with it. He was always like, ah, you know, whatever, and then he would say, I've I've been in dark places, but I never commit suicide, not that I've ever been suicidal or anything. So, I think it was a combination of just family life, and I think it was maybe the job, but, I think it was more stuff that he was dealing, with throughout his life. I think policing was almost sort of a getaway for him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've said before that like police officers are people that deal with trauma in their own lives and then have to go out and solve other people's trauma while
Yeah.
they're subsequently dealing with their own traumas.
Right.
And we're not required to have mental health check ins. And here we are as normal human beings dealing with normal shit in everyday life, going out here and trying to solve other people's problems. What makes us qualified to do that? Like, yes, we have trainings. Yes, we have this and that. But as far as mental health goes, and as far as like you said earlier, talking people down in situations, that's just natural. But how are we supposed to help anyone if we're not required to help ourselves? I feel like it should be a requirement, and maybe that's coming one day, but we need to, of any profession, need to be checked in on or made sure mental health is okay because maybe that could have saved Adam. Maybe that could have saved a lot of other officers and a lot of other people because, like you said, I think it's a mask too, a lot of times because our job is so chaotic. We're going from call to call. We're doing so many distracting things, and we
Yeah.
could pick up shifts and not go home. And we could truly like avoid so much with
Yeah.
this job
Yeah.
that it could all pile on. And
Right. And
wow.
statistically too, we're more likely to die by suicide than in the line of
Yep.
fire. And
Yep.
so why is that? I think there's posters in like every police department about that, but what are we doing about it? What are departments
Nothing.
doing? And
Nothing.
more specifically, men's mental health in their mid 30s. Why statistically are they more prone to commit suicide? I think it's just something that probably needs to be looked into a little bit more. And I think departments and head of departments should be asking, what are we doing for our mental health for our police officers here? How do we get them to stay? How do we get them to stay healthy?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Because how can we send someone out to go help other people with their problems if they're dealing with their own issues? Well, I appreciate you so much for sharing that. And you were so respectful and so kind about his memory. And I just appreciate you sharing that because I know a lot of other people that have gone through this. I know people who've committed suicide or officers. Obviously not as close as your experience, but I know that I'm sure some of my listeners have or unfortunately will
yeah,
one day. And it's just something that is taboo but needs to be talked about. So I really appreciate it. Like really, really appreciate you sharing that. So after Adam's death, you continue to work, right? You still have to, that's another thing, is we go through traumatic experiences and then we get our week off or whatever it is, and then we have to go back to work. So you start, going back to work, and you kind of explained to me, how work kind of started not feeling the same. Maybe you started noticing like cracks in the foundation, maybe, how officers are being treated, how we're treating each other. Explain how it felt like going back to work and just like how you felt in your mental health and how the job felt.
Yeah. So I took about a month off. I just
As you should.
Yeah, I didn't see myself going back any earlier than that. Once I did end up going back, it was basically just a constant reminder. So it was very hard, but I worked through it. And my relationship with the people at the department, there were very few that I was really really close with, and that helped me through everything. And then there were some that my relationship completely changed. And the camaraderie kind of fell through the cracks at the department completely. Because it is hard. We've experienced such a significant loss within the department. How do we pick ourselves back up? And especially the way that somebody passes, I think people kind of point fingers and who can we blame for this? Because as cops, we're kind of like trying to find out why all the time. And so I don't fault anybody for that, right? Like everybody deserves to have their own opinion and see things, their way. But um, a lot of relationships and friendships kind of suffered throughout that. And so um, it didn't feel the same, and it was never going to feel the same. I worked through it very, very well and honorably, and I'm proud of how I handled myself throughout, especially grieving. I had never had to experience grief the way that I did. And so that was super new for me, but I still felt like I handled myself fairly well. And yeah, I was there for pretty much a year and a half after Adam had passed.
Yeah. I can't even imagine like going back working where you worked with, like, for the listeners, like she worked the same shift with him. Like that's a lot. Like you saw him at work when you worked.
Yep.
It's not like he just worked with you at the same department, because you could work in the same department and never see somebody really.
Yes. Yes.
Like
Exactly.
working on the same shift. Yeah. I can't imagine it'd be the same. So,
Right.
so then I don't know if it's shortly after or a long, or it couldn't have been that long after, but you you're dealing with loss, you're working, you're navigating what you want to do, stay in law enforcement, leave, and you get diagnosed with PCOS and PMDD.
Yes.
Can you describe what those are to my listeners and how you got diagnosed with that?
Yeah. So PMDD is premenstrual dysphoria disorder, and then PCOS is the polycystic ovary syndrome. Um, and I actually just like literally a couple of weeks ago got these diagnoses. So
Oh,
it's very
wow.
yeah. So I had always had issues with my periods basically, and I knew that they were abnormally painful. Um, but I I've been dealing with it and nobody had any answers for me. And so once me and my current boyfriend moved down to Florida and I had to establish new care, my doctor was like, "Why don't we figure out why this is happening?" And I was like, "Oh,
Wow, finally.
well, so thank you." So I had blood work done and ultrasound, and they found a lot of cysts on both of my ovaries. And so I want to be a mom more than anything in this world. And I know that a stressful job and a stressful, work environment is not going to help me or my fertility. And so that was another reason that was kind of like, I say the cherry on top of,
Yeah.
okay, it's my time.
Yeah. So you found love again, which I'm so happy for you, and you deserve that. Everyone deserves that. Did you meet him and you guys moved to Florida together, or did you meet him and he already lived in Florida?
So we met before. We met in Connecticut. He was
Okay.
actually a manager of a racetrack in the town that I worked in. And so he would have to hire me to do security at the race.
Okay, cool.
That's how we met. So I always joke that Sean being the manager and me being like the police officer there, he would have to be like, "Hey, go take care of that fight in the pits," like, "Don't worry, I got it," you know? So, we met, around this time last year. Well, not met. I had known him from working at the track for, the years that I worked at, my department, but, we started getting pretty serious around this time last year. And then it kinda got more serious, more serious. We came down here to visit in February, and for Speed Week. And, he had kinda stepped away from that job managing up at the racetrack, and so, he was kind of on a, like, completely clean slate, didn't really know where he was gonna go, but, knew that he could do pretty much anything. So, we came down here and we loved it, and then we went home and we were like, "Why not?" Like, what is holding us back from moving to Florida? And so we decided, "Hey, let's go back next month and look at apartments." And then we went back and
Wow.
forth, looked at apartments, and we were down here by the middle of May. So it happened fairly quick.
I love it because I just moved to Florida a year and a half ago.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, very similar. Um, speaking of, my fiance just walked in the door. But so you work at a department in Florida, or
Yes.
worked. Um, Same as me, because it's like, this is what we know. This is a way to get a job too. Like when you're moving to a brand new state, you don't know anyone.
Right.
So you're working there, and how was it adjusting to like this new department?
Well, Florida's a lot different than up north, that's for
It's
sure.
so different. Yeah.
So different. Um, there were things that I, like, didn't like, and there were things that I liked, but everybody at the police department was so great. I love everybody. I can definitely say, like, I have made some lifelong friends. I was just texting my corporal and, today, and he was like, "Hey, you and Sean should come to our place for Christmas." Like,
Oh, so nice.
so I've made really, really, and I text my chief, I've made really good relationships with the people that I met down here. And if not, anything, then I'm just glad that I was able to meet, everybody there. So
Yeah. So you get down here, you start working, you're a police officer, you find love again. And how did you know it was time to leave?
yeah, I think obviously the medical diagnosis is, I think, were like the cherry on the top, like I said, but other reasons I obviously, it was never the same for me after Adam.
Yeah.
I think being in a different department helped a little bit, but that love and that passion for that job, I think, kinda died with him that day. And unfortunately, it's just how my experience went. I originally saw myself doing this job for 20, 25 years and retiring from it and then finding something else, but unfortunately, my path kind of took me a different way, and that's okay. I'm not, mad about it. I'm not mad at Adam, obviously, but, um, I had to come to terms with that, and I think it takes a really strong person to stay in this for 20, 25 years, but it also
Yeah.
takes a strong person to realize when it's their time to go, and I loved the job, but I didn't love it as much as I should being in the position, and I knew kind of when I was coming home and I was irritable all the time and I wasn't getting, adequate sleep, and people are okay with that, but I got to a point where I wasn't okay with it anymore. And I didn't want my relationship, or, we have 3 cats and a dog that I call our fur babies. But I think dealing with that and trying to not be irritable and also be, present at home and not watching the clock and, "Oh, I got 6 hours before I have to go to work," and, that feeling was just not going away from me, and I thought, a new department, a clean slate might help, but unfortunately it just didn't. And then, put the medical diagnosis on top of it. It was like, okay, you know what? I can find something else that I enjoy and ultimately get paid more to do. I think pay was really
Yeah.
difficult. Coming from Connecticut to Florida, I took a huge pay cut. And to have to put our lives on the line and have this dangerous job for barely anything was really hard for me to wrap my head around. And so, I can change my lifestyle. It's fine. I don't have to buy new clothes all the time. But at the same time, I feel like as cops, we shouldn't have to struggle. And
Totally agree.
so I think all of that, was, you know what? Okay. It's my time.
Yeah. So, on that note, what advice would you give to someone who's like 1 foot out the door? They're just nervous because they're afraid they're going to miss it or not
Yeah.
find something else that, is as good or whatever. What would you say to that person?
Rip the Band-Aid off.
Yeah.
I love seeing people get out of the game, like it's find something that you're super passionate about. I had you saw my video and I've had a lot of people message me and say, "Damn, if I had something else to do, I'd be out of this." And
Right.
it's I guess what I would say too is don't let this job consume you. And I think, you know, I'll never get over the death of Adam, but I've learned to move forward and learn how to live with that. And he's taught me so many things, with what I've had to deal with. And one of them is, don't make this job your everything. Don't let it consume you. Pay attention at home and be present and pay attention to how you feel. And it, I hate people who feel like or I hate that people feel that if they leave, they're being weak. It doesn't make you weak. It takes somebody who is very intuitive and strong to know, no, it's my time. And it's hard to let go of the ego thing, but I can guarantee once you grieve your career and like your law enforcement career and not badge and carrying a gun every day, once you grieve that and learn how to kind of get over that, it's more of a relief than anything, I think, at least for me. And so if somebody's thinking about it, I say just rip the Band-Aid off. You don't have to have everything figured out, but if it's consuming you, don't let it.
Yeah. I always in the beginning, it was like 25 years, 25 years. And I'm at the point where, like, if I know it's time for me to go, then I will. And that's why I build other things around me and
Right.
do other things so that if I need to go, like, I will have something to fall back on. But even if you don't, like, as long as, I mean, being a cop, you can do anything.
Mhm.
Once you've been a cop, you can do any job in the world,
Yeah.
truly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, you are set up for success regardless. And I love that you said, rip the Band-Aid off, just do it.
Yeah.
So, if you're listening and you're thinking about it, this is your sign. So, what goals do you have for the future and what can we expect from your life moving forward?
Yeah, so I came up with a plan and I am already in esthetician school.
I
So
love.
yes. So I'm gonna get my license as an esthetician. And then I also would love to I started my master's degree, which is Homeland Security with a concentration in cybersecurity. So I would love to finish that and then get a job, in the cyber world. I think that that's a ever-changing climate that we're kind of dealing with, especially with, the cryptocurrency and everything like that. So um I would love to do, anti-fraud stuff, things like that, anti-money laundering maybe. But kind of finishing that and then going from there, and then just focusing on my family, not having to leave at night, being able to go to bed with my boyfriend every night is pretty awesome. I don't have to leave, and be like, "Hey, I'll see you in the morning," and I'll sleep by myself, it's nice to be able to actually have time with my family here. So
Yeah. No, absolutely. I love hearing that. I love cosmetology. I wonder, how far you are from me, we'll have to connect after this because I'm in Florida too, and I need somebody to do
Oh,
my
yeah.
stuff.
I gotta build my clientele.
Do all my
So.
stuff, girl. But where can if you're open to it, if there's girls who can relate to your story or guys, obviously, that can relate to your story, I'm sure you'd be open to talking to them on like messaging.
Yes.
Where can they find you online?
So my Instagram is Kylie Ariana. My middle name is Ariana. So KylieArianna. That's where you can find me on Instagram. And then obviously if anybody needed my number, they can definitely DM me and we can definitely go from there.
I appreciate you so much. Like, truly so glad I found you and your video. And I was like, is this girl's going to want to come on or if she's going to see my message? But I love the video you posted and your story. And now learning even more about you and your story. I'm so glad we connected. And I hope we can continue to connect in the future, whether it's you coming on again for advice or you giving me a facial. I'm ready.
Whatever you need.
Ready, girl. But I really appreciate your time. And yeah, you guys contact her. I'm sure she would love to help you.